My name's Kara Porter. I'm an attorney in Salt Lake City. I do civil rights law. This is Kim Quick. Until recently, he was the Bannock County coroner. And this is Shauna Quick, Kim's wife, and these are the parents of Lance Quick. So we decided to hold this press conference because, as many of you may know, in December of 2018, Lance Allen Quick died in the Bannock County Jail. And shortly after that, the Bannock County Sheriff held his own press conference to give a version of events that, and this is basically sort of a rebuttal about that. It's also to announce that the Quicks are pursuing a tort claim against Bannock County and the officers involved in this death. Before the Quicks kind of give you a little explanation, let me just give you a couple of quick words about the claim. First, I want to tell you something, and I want it to mean something. So let me first indicate that I've been doing civil rights law for more than 30 years. I started my career by defending sheriffs and jails. And then I've spent the last, couple of decades doing, on the other side of the V, as they call it. So I've been doing this for 30 years, and this is the most appalling case I've ever seen. It is the most shocking case I've ever seen. And we gave you the factual allegations. And let me point out that those factual allegations are almost entirely taken from the jail logs themselves and from the video that's available from the cell and from other records of the county. This is their own records that paint this picture of what happened to Lance over that week. I want to just mention a couple of other things, the law stuff, before we get to the Quicks telling you about Lance and how they feel and why they're doing this. First, we have made a monetary demand in the notice of claim. That's on me. The Quicks never even asked me about money. They've never mentioned the word money, but I have told them, if you want to make a change to a system, the law only recognizes one way to do it, and that is by hitting them in the pocketbook. And that's why there is a substantial monetary demand in this notice of claim. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I have a good sense, I believe, of what a typical claim like this, what a jury would do with a claim like this. And as we've alleged, we believe a jury would award even punitive damages, because what happened is shocking. This was not just a heart attack just as they were getting ready to take him to a hospital. It was something much more insidious. I want to mention one or two other things that may come up. I'm going to hope that you all will have had a chance to read the allegations and everything. I mean, in a nutshell, he just basically wasted away, became increasingly psychotic, didn't even understand how to eat or drink for almost a week, and then he just died. They knew he was going to die, I believe, because they started recording in their logs whether he was still breathing or not. One second while this extremely loud truck goes. I think there's going to be a couple of things that you might hear that I would like to respond to in advance. One of them is, I think there's a notation that the sheriff had made at one point saying that Lance had charged the jail nurse or something to that effect. And he may say, well, because he supposedly did that, then it's okay that we let him die. But actually, from the video, we think it's pretty obvious he's actually trying to run out of the cell. We mentioned in the allegations that he'd been trying to get out of his cell by doing irrational things. He was trying to get out with a plastic spoon at one point, and he would try to tap and see if he could find something. I mean, he was not rational at the time. So, and that's not an excuse anyway when you know someone needs their medications to just let them die. The second thing we may hear, because we've already heard it, is that, gee, it wasn't us, we couldn't find him a bed in a behavioral health unit. And there are a couple of major problems with that. First, there is a big difference between finding somebody a bed to stay and then be treated as an inpatient, versus taking somebody to the emergency room. When you know that somebody is dying, you can go get them an IV. You can go get prescriptions. You can go get a doctor to look at them, and then you can return him to the jail if there is, no bed. In other words, there's medical treatment where you stabilize the patient, and there was no attempt made of any kind to do that. And then there is whether you can place him in a bed. And we would also note, as mentioned in these allegations, that the jail, the sheriff seemed to have strong views that jailers should not have to be transporting inmates to hospitals, that an ambulance should be allowed to do that. But here, the hospital said if you want to bring him in for lab work, tests, things like that, sure, bring him in, for medical treatment. You'll just need to have a law enforcement officer with him, which, by the way, at least in Salt Lake, where I'm from in Utah, that's standard procedure. Nothing weird about that. Anyway, but also, the jail didn't even try to call any of the other 6 hospitals in the surrounding areas to find out if they had a bed. When they found out there was no immediate bed at the local hospital in the behavioral unit, that was the end of that. There was nothing else that was attempted until supposedly there was an attempt made about an hour or 2 before he died. We haven't seen the evidence of that. So those are just 2 comments I wanted to make. I recommended to the Quicks that they hold this press conference so they didn't have to relive this throughout the day as people continue to call. And I wanted to ask a few questions of the Quicks. You guys can ask them questions too, but there's a few things I wanted to talk to you about. For example, Mr. Quick here, many of you may know that he, until recently, was the Bannock County coroner. So he had actually worked with the sheriff's office, and he had actual conversations with Sheriff Nielsen about Lance and what Lance needed. And I'm just wondering if you can kind of summarize a couple of the conversations you had with the sheriff, while Lance was still alive.
Yes, it was a daunting week conversing with the sheriff. Monday, Tuesday. He didn't answer his phone on Wednesday. He called me back on Thursday. And then again on Friday morning he called again. The initial questions I had for Sheriff, he was out of town at a sheriff's conference over in Boise area. And I just was curious if he knew that my son was in jail at his facility or not. He didn't say he knew or not, but he said he would check into it. He had to go to some other meetings at that time, but he would get back with me. And he did get back with me Tuesday evening and said that everything's looking good. They had the designated examiner there doing the paperwork, and he should be out of jail within 12 hours or less, is his statement to me. And so I felt relieved that he was doing something that way.
I'm just bringing Jake over because Jake helped me write this complaint, and I wanted to hear this.
So we felt good about that he was actually working on this, but the reality was that didn't transpire. So the next day we called down looking for him at the hospital because that's where we thought he would be. And they said, no, he's not here at the hospital, so we called back out of the jail. And they said, no, well, he's here. I said, well, why? He's supposed to be in the hospital. He said, well, who told you that? And we answered it, well, the Sheriff Nelson told us that he would be out by now, getting the medical treatment that he needed and get some help with behavioral health also. But primarily, we were concerned about his physical well-being, not just his mental health, but also his... we'll take a break here while the...
If you have any specific questions that they could respond to?
One thing we'd like to know is just a little bit more about Lance and what he was suffering with.
Lance was diagnosed in 2003 with PTSD as he was working as a firefighter EMT for
recent thing. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, he was eventually diagnosed with bipolar 2. And so for 12 years, he struggled with that. And he had some mania before, but recently he had just told me 5 weeks before his first incident in November that he had not had a manic episode in 3 years, which we had been feeling so great about because he was doing so much better. He had a business, superior home inspections, and he was loving that. He was doing very well. And so when this hit him, he was shocked that he was doing as poorly as he was. And
Talk a little bit about Lance as a person. You know, what was he like? His personality
his personality was always happy-go-lucky. He wanted to know people. He made friends wherever he went. He seemed to enjoy life. He hated that he had an illness that nobody understood and that it wasn't visible. And he just loved people, and he loved his nieces and nephews, and he wanted to live a life that was productive and meaningful.
Thank you. So that tells you a little bit about Lance. That's one thing that we've heard over and over from people, is that he was a fun guy. He was a guy you could talk to. He was a guy that made you feel better about yourself. We've just seen that over and over again. You know, that Mr. Quick did specifically mention to the sheriff and others mentioned to the jailers that he had to have his medications. And the jailers themselves noted that he wasn't eating or drinking, didn't even understand the concept. And I've described the conditions under which Lance was staying. I'm not going to describe those, you know, on video camera, but and they were pretty appalling.
Was there a reason why he wasn't giving his medication for any reason?
The only reason that we can find in their records, well, there isn't actually, we can't find a reason in their records. The only notation that we can find anywhere is this issue about, well, on the 12th, in the afternoon, we started looking for a bed to have him admitted somewhere, which is a totally different question from getting his medications and getting an IV and getting stabilized. That is literally the only thing that we see. And then the sheriff had a press conference afterwards where, he appeared to just feel like, well, once they called one place and it didn't have a bed immediately, gee, what could we do? So I could not find a reason, and we scoured every minute and every line of every record.
Do you believe that the sheriff and the jail were adequately notified of Lance's needs?
Absolutely.
100%.
100%. They were told from the first conversation.
I mean, Mr. Quick himself, who of course was known to the sheriff and who was the county coroner, he not only told him what he mentioned earlier about he needs these, but he even told him which medications they were and what would happen to Lance if he didn't get them. Also, the jail logs themselves repeatedly say things like not eating or drinking, doesn't understand the concept of eating. And then we described quite a bit of unusual conduct. We gave you a few still shots and to give a sense of what you could see. Remember, they put him in a room with a camera to observe him. And so they were on, Mr. Quick told them, Lance's friend who was a nurse told them, well, you told them several times, and it's in their own logs.
Yep, and it was in a cell that had no water, no toilet, no facilities whatsoever, just a drain in the floor, and that was it, concrete little room, that's it. A blanket and a pad on the floor, that's it.
So if there's any...
Appalling.
Just tell you procedurally what happens at this point. What we've done, we have not filed what you would typically consider a lawsuit. We've included some state law claims because we believe that it rises to the level of at least recklessness, callousness, malice, all of the terms under state law. So we've included some state law claims. So because of that, the Quicks have filed a notice of tort claim. The draft complaint that we attached to that we sent you is is what will be filed. I mean, obviously, we'll revise it if we learn any more information. We'll correct one name in there, which would be Carlson. I think I sent an email around correcting one name to Carlson, and so we'll make a few changes. But if the county does not step forward and agree to make some changes, agree to compensate for this horrendous nightmare,
It should never happen.
Which should never
anybody.
I mean,
That's right.
And he was the coroner. He had access to the sheriff. It should have been taken care of. Nobody else would have had that access that quickly to the sheriff. And when we called, the jailers wouldn't deliver a message to Lance. We never got anything except that he was incapacitated, that he couldn't call us. And so we couldn't even get to him.
We couldn't even see him, talk to him, or anything that whole week.
And I would note, too, that the jailers, when they kept telling the quicks that Lance was incapacitated, they never said, by the way, he hasn't been eating or drinking for days. You know, by the way, he's completely unresponsive. They never told him any of these kinds of
No, but the sheriff did on Tuesday night. He said he hadn't been eating or drinking much. That was his words, quote.
But on Tuesday, they were at least saying that he had been drinking some, and then of course he starts to get more unresponsive.
Yes.
But then the sheriff then is on notice by Tuesday that there's going to be an issue about dehydration. I mean, I believe every human adult knows that you have to drink when what's going to happen to you. So if I'm hoping that I'll be able to talk to somebody with the county about the changes that need to be made, what needs to be done to make this right, to prevent this from happening again, which is their other number one priority.
That is it.
And if that doesn't come to pass, then we'll tweak the complaint and we'll file it. So. Appreciate it. If anybody has any other questions, I told them they'd only have to live to do this one time. So if anybody has any questions, follow up for fact questions or something, just call me, because they don't want to have to relive this every hour. So,
could you talk just a little bit about why Lance was in jail and why he wasn't allowed to either post a bond or get out of jail, or why he was in for the week that he was in?
I can tell you what the records show. I mean, because his friend called that evening, and they told her that he was incapacitated, and she thought, oh well, it was a DUI. I guess he was drunk. I mean, that was very odd. The family would have found, and friends would have found that very odd, but that's what they were told, right? So then she calls, I believe, the next day and says, can I bail him out? Or maybe she called, actually, I believe it was Saturday night. Can I bail him out? Well, no, the next day was going to be a Sunday. And apparently there's limited ability to bail people out here on a Sunday. We'll have to look into that. And then by Monday, he was incoherent, to quote the sheriff. So apparently at that point, they couldn't have him arraigned, and I guess they felt like he couldn't be bailed out. I mean, nobody ever offered to let you guys take custody of him, right?
No.
So it kind of makes no sense to me. Then there's an order on the 11th that says, do not house him in a cell for inmates. And so what do? They leave him in that cell. And I provided some pictures, and just a few, because frankly, I think they're upsetting. But you can tell what he was living with. I mean, there's one of them there where he's trying to see under the door. He tried to pull the door open. He kept trying to get out with a spoon, and he didn't understand what food was. This thing is horrible. It's totally preventable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
100%.
Since Lance's death, all you ever hear when they pick people up now is they're medically cleared at the hospital, and Lance never had that opportunity.
Yeah,
Nope,
just
never
take
did.
him there, get him stabilized, bring him back if you don't want to call any other hospital to look for a bed.
Yep.
So, anyway, I
Yeah.
appreciate you guys coming. I'm sorry about the noise and the confusion about the location, but like I said, if you have any other questions, just go ahead and call me, because this is very emotional for them, and they're going to need some downtime. Thank you.